us? Praying about it?
All right. Hello.
Hey, friends and neighbors.
We are live. It's exciting. It's so hot here for some reason.
We both had to turn off our respective fans so that we could record this. For the lovely podcast listeners, hello, podcast listeners. We make the sacrifices for you.
For you. Hello, replay crew. We hope your life is good wherever you are.
Yeah.
For some reason, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are both having summer again. We don't recommend it. We don't recommend it. But we've got a great show for you today. We've got some really cool empathy exercises and also a discussion that I think is probably our most requested, most questioned thing. How do you do this? So we're excited to get into it with you guys. And I think that's all. Away we go.
Let's do it. Y'all, what was that? How cool was that? Full props to our team member, Eleanor, for being a genius at things. Now we have our own countdown. Just like that. It's still fun music. It's the music you all know and love from our YouTubes. But we're pretty excited. All right, let's jump in to empathy exercises and get the ball rolling.
Well, this first one has to do with menstruation, so it must be one of the ones you want to talk about.
Actually, you put it in there.
Did I put it in there? I was like, oh, menstruation, that's Erin.
I'm so glad I'm known for being the menstruation.
Oh, yes, I remember now. So one of the bills that is up in the California State Senate is that California could require schools to provide menstrual products for free for all of its students. And this is something that Dr. Erin and I talk a lot about, where menstrual products are just as required as toilet paper is. So if you provide toilet paper, you need to be providing menstrual products. So this is this is from NPR brings us this news. And this is an exciting step forward. Shocking that California is leading the way in equity. No, it's not shocking at all.
Not shocking at all.
California's job in these 50 states. So
it's kind of their bag these days.
Yeah.
All right. Empathy exercise number 2 is an update from, I believe, last week's Good Doctors Diagnose, where we talked about the exciting news that Mexico City was going to remove its statue of colonizer and not so great dude Christopher Columbus and replace it with a statue of an indigenous woman. This is again an Indian country update from your Indian country correspondent. I would like to give full credit to Jessica Hernandez, whom I follow on the Twitter, who brought a different perspective to this. So, all of these situations, especially with statue replacements, are complicated. I mean, replacing them isn't complicated necessarily, but what goes into them and what replaces them and how we commemorate things in the form of statues is a messy business. And so Jessica said Mexico City is replacing the Columbus statue with a statue of an indigenous woman, but instead of hiring an indigenous artisan or artist, they hired a white Mexican man to create it. So many indigenous Mexican artisans who could have been hired were not given this opportunity. It's being sold as a way of honoring indigenous roots while continuing to portray this narrative of the past and not present in reference to our indigenous pueblos. So it's this nameless, faceless, ancient indigenous woman statue, which, perpetuates the myth that indigenous peoples aren't contemporary, aren't around, aren't still living around us and with us and living and breathing their own culture. So I thought that was an interesting update and perspective on it, something that the article we read last week and the information we read last week about this. All right. Empathy exercise. Next one, also me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going on a string here, and then Dr. Kristen's going to jump in a sec. Super exciting to hear that Maia Chaka made history this weekend as the first Black woman to officiate an NFL game. So representation does matter. It's important to see people in places and jobs that are not traditionally held by those folks. And so well done, Maia. Well done, the NFL, for giving her that platform and showing that women are, in fact, capable of doing lots and lots of things. Lots of them. On the issue of representation, you would think I planned this, but I didn't. Coming to you from your hockey correspondent now. I should have like different hats that I could trade on and off. We should just have a bunch of hats. That would be good.
Eleanor, you could have like a hat fly in.
Hat fly in for each one. Only the replay crew gets the effects of Eleanor.
Get the effects of Eleanor.
Everyone else can just imagine that I'm trading a hat now for my hockey hat. To highlight the fact that I'm finding him, Al Montoya is the first Cuban American player in the NHL and has been doing a lot of outreach work over the summer because he plays for the Dallas Stars. They had a very long summer. Insert jokes about getting eliminated from the playoffs. They did pretty good. But he has been reaching out specifically to Hispanic and Latino communities around the area to talk about the sport of hockey and representation in hockey. So congrats, Al. Good luck with the Dallas Stars this season. Dr. K.
Speaking of Texas.
What? We didn't even plan this. We're so good at this job.
So good at this. Anyone who is unfamiliar with American political events right now, the state of Texas just passed a very restrictive reproductive health bill prohibiting the termination of pregnancy after 6 weeks, which is very problematic because most people who are pregnant don't frequently know they're pregnant until 7, 8, or 9 weeks. So a 6-week cutoff is kind of problematic. And there's a lot of other stuff in it that's even more troubling from a business perspective. And so there's been a lot of companies making noise about helping people relocate, but nobody's made as strong of a statement as Salesforce did this week, which is essentially if you are a Salesforce employee and you live in Texas and you are in essentially fear for your life, they will pay to relocate you to the city of your choice and guarantee you your job with Salesforce. This is a very strong statement from a major business player about healthcare and the legal restrictions around healthcare, the likes of which the United States has not seen before. Now, when there was a voting rights restriction bill in the state of Georgia, Major League Baseball responded by moving its All-Star game. So we've seen reactions to bills before, but never to healthcare. And this is especially important. And I want to remind our international viewers and listeners of this, because in the United States, your healthcare is tied to your employer. And so for an employer to say we cannot in good conscience provide healthcare in this state because of these restrictions is a big statement and one that we should be kind of paying attention to moving forward. The law, also the American Justice, the Federal Department of Justice is bringing a lawsuit against the Supreme Court of Texas for this law. So, watch this space. But from our perspective, as about an empathy exercise, it's an incredible exercise of empathy that Salesforce is giving to understand how that this is terrifying to a lot of its employees, that this is prohibitive for a lot of its employees, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. So we wanted to point that out as a really, from our perspective, positive, but also interesting move forward on the business community. So back to one of our other, we have no transition for this one, guys, but this is one of our chestnuts around here. Tell me about Jeopardy, Dr. Aaron.
Yeah. So for those of you outside of the United States, you'll remember we've talked several times this summer in our empathy exercises about the ongoing controversy around choosing a new host for the U.S. game show Jeopardy. Alex Trebek, who was the longtime host, 38 years, I think, passed away last December. And so they've been on this prolonged search to find a new host. They found one who just so happened to also be the executive producer. And he filmed a week's worth of episodes before he was fired, both from his job as host and executive producer. because of series of podcasts from 2013 and 2014 were unearthed in which he was extremely derogatory towards women and people from other marginalized groups. So yesterday was the season premiere of this new Jeopardy, and they had these episodes that they had to air because they've already filmed the people that are involved in them. And especially right now in Jeopardy, we have a 19-day champion. So Matt Amodio was coming back to start this season. They filmed 5 episodes. Presumably he is in or not in. And so they had to air it. So I was kind of geared up to watch and see how they addressed what was going to be slightly awkward, that we're getting a week's worth of shows from this guy who not only was fired, but was fired kind of in disgrace. Dramatically so. It's a very controversial summer for fans of the show. A lot of people were upset at his choice. A lot of people were upset at the way Jeopardy handled it. And last night kind of made a lot of sense to me, even though I was surprised, because Jeopardy has handled this in a lot of ways by not handling it. And that's exactly what they did last night, which was just air the episode that Mike Richards filmed with no preamble, no little sign on the bottom. Who knows? So presumably next week they might address it, or they're just going to pretend there wasn't a host controversy in the first place. I don't know. It's an example, I thought, in terms of empathy of what not to do. I'm not saying they needed to, and I had some people come at me on Twitter for what I said. I'm not saying they needed to recognize specifically what he was accused of. But you could just say, like, you know, as you are aware, we are in a period of transition with hosts. We pre-filmed these episodes and need to air them for the whatever. So you could have done it in a way that didn't necessarily draw more attention. But I think attention is needed when a person in a public position behaves in the manner in which he behaved on his own podcast, no less. So it'll be interesting to see what they do next week. We're getting more guest hosting. Mayim Bialik is starting off. Maybe she will mention something at the start of the show, or maybe Jeopardy is just going to try and sweep this Mike Richards incident away as if it didn't happen, which would not be my advice. So that's the Jeopardy update. Our final empathy exercise. Dr. K, back to you.
So I follow, largely against my will, the sport of Formula One motor car racing.
It used to be against your will.
It's like moderately. So it's my husband's favorite and only sport he follows. It's the only one John loves. And so we watch it. I follow all of the folks on Twitter. I have opinions about teams. I'm very excited to see George Russell next year in a Mercedes car, for anyone who has followed. So all that being said, I am very aware of a gentleman named Lewis Hamilton that you may or may not be aware of. He is a British driver. He is one of the best in the world, and honestly, one of the best in the history of the sport. He is really good at driving a car really fast. And for a long time, he was very much more known for being Nicole Scherzinger's boyfriend and having a lot of dramatic off-track antics. And in the past couple of years, he has transitioned from being known as that, because he's not with Nicole anymore, but he's transitioned into an activist. And so very famously last year, he got fined for wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts at the finish, in the starting photo. He knelt along with his fellow driver, Sebastian Vettel, who is German, I should say, several times on several occasions when it was being said that they were doing this to honor the murder of George Floyd and George Floyd's memory. So he's a big activist now. Wonderful. And last night he took it a step further. Lewis Hamilton bought an entire table at the Met Gala and invited young Black British designers, fashion designers, to be able to join him at the Met Gala, which is a massive event in the world of fashion that takes place at the Metropolitan Museum of Art every year. It is kind of thrown and sponsored by Vogue's Anna Wintour. And the point of it is to be seen, and that he used this influence to bring these designers is something that is massive, and we wanted to shout out. I like Lewis a lot. I think he has a lot of lovely things going for him, and last night even put him up higher in my estimation.
Yes, and I think it's particularly important because each Met Gala has a theme, and yesterday's theme was American related. I can't remember exactly what it was called. So to recognize the diversity that exists in terms of American fashion designers was great. Would have loved to have seen more Indigenous designers, especially for an American themed one. To the best of my knowledge, on the Twitter, there was one woman who is herself an Indigenous designer, jewelry designer, and wore some of her work to the Met. But, you know, baby steps, we'll get there. But shout out to Lewis Hamilton. It's a cool thing to do.
Yeah, anytime we take a baby step in fashion, I feel like we're taking a pole vault leap because it's so retrograde.
Yeah.
But Dr. Aaron's not wrong. There's always things to be called out, but I do want to give Lewis Hamilton his props.
For sure.
So with all that being said, speaking of growth to be made. Yeah, growth to be made.
Yeah, growth to be made. I'll accept that transition. Transition accepted.
Transition accepted. My pen is down, ready to talk directly with you guys. I have all the show notes for Eleanor ready to go. We're going to talk about how to have empathy for harmful people. And one of the, we're going to get a little personal in this one, guys. We're going to be honest with you about who is hard for us to hold empathy for. Some of these categories of people may include you. We want you to know that we still affirm your humanity. And that is one of the reasons we are struggling. We are not outright denying at any point in time. We are trying hard to hold the innate dignity and worth of every human being with decisions and actions that appear harmful to us or are scientifically harmful or are factually harmful. And it's a difficult journey. And we want to be honest. This is probably the most common question that I get when I give these workshops, and will be the most common when Dr. Aaron gets to join me again. Right now, they're all just me via Zoom. But soon we'll be doing them again together. And I know this will be what we get, which is, how do I have empathy for people I can't stand? And how do I have empathy for people that I think are actively harmful? Not just that I don't like, not just that I don't care for, but that are actively harmful. And so one of the ones that I want to start, I know best to talk about this through example. So is there anything I'll launch into the Greg Abbott of it all, unless you've got something else to say.
Yeah. I'll jump into the controversial waters because the one that I'm struggling with currently the most, aside from the Greg Abbott of it all and those who agree with him, are folks who are refusing to get vaccinated for the COVID. I have spent a lot of time understanding why, and it's a spectrum, right? Like, so there's people that are hesitant. There's people that are worried about vaccines due to the long relationship of traumatic medical interventions in their communities. But that's the one that I struggle with the most in terms of, I mean, and we talk about this a lot, right? Like, empathy is easier for me to grapple with when I talk about it as a intellectual exercise, in an intellectual posture, because emotionally it's very challenging. And I'm not sure that, and we can get into this, and you and I've talked about this offline a lot in the last couple of weeks, that we can understand other people's emotions in a way that we can understand their worldview, their background, what media is influencing them, what kind of external things have helped guide their perspective on a particular issue, which I think goes for Greg Abbott as well. So I think for me, that's framing it that way has been helpful, because I struggle with that one a lot, because, and we all have a whole range of different emotions about the COVID, but it is a very deeply emotional issue for people in a lot of ways. And so I framing it that way has helped me to kind of create some distance in a way, that protects my own emotional state.
Yeah. And overall, our biggest tip on how to have empathy for harmful people is to separate your emotions about them, and to separate your emotions about the entire situation, to view it as best you can logically and factually. I got into a minor argument with somebody a couple days ago who deeply believed that we have to lead with our heart in everything. And when I look at the world around us, I find that to be, if I did that, I would be exhausted and terrified all the time, and I wouldn't ever live not out of my emotions. Yeah. And when I look at the work that needs to be done and the state of the world, I need to move forward out of my logic and out of my mental posture for understanding, and out of my that way, because then that frees up more of my emotional space, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because if I lead with my emotions, then everybody gets all of my emotions, and not everybody needs them, but everybody needs my understanding. And so that's been my posture.
Yeah. And before you get to yours, I want to make sure and say that we state out loud that this does not mean we're telling you that you have to suppress your emotions or ignore your emotions, or not give yourself space to feel things emotionally. Want to be really clear, that's not what we're saying about this, because, especially women, we get accused a lot of times of being too emotional about things. It is capable to do it. It's really messy. I still get really angry and really frustrated and sad about a lot of things that are happening in the world. And that doesn't have to do with my practice of empathy with the things that I am frustrated and scared and sad and angry about.
Yeah. And that's a really great point. So there's times it's like when I'm talking with Erin about things that are hard for me, she gets all my emotions. She gets them all.
I do.
And I get all of hers. And that's how this works. But when we are talking about this with y'all, when we're talking about it with professionally and in other situations, we're going to be a lot more emotionally neutral. And the freedom of separating, not suppressing, separating, I want to say that again, is what allows us to do that. So mine definitely recently is Greg Abbott. And some of that is because I lived in Texas for 5 years. I love a lot of people who live in Texas, a lot of women who live in Texas, a lot of people who menstruate who live in Texas, a lot. And I have a lot of very strong emotions around the Texas legislature's recent decisions, not just about the reproductive health, but about voting rights and about their filibuster and about some other things. And for me, one of the ways that I've had to do that is say, okay, well, all politicians, we have to follow the money. Like no politician is their own person. We know that campaign finance laws don't allow them to be their own person. So let me chase the money and see where it goes, and where it went explained a lot of the decisions that are happening. And so I can say, okay, logically, I can see where this is going. There are a lot of, and somebody asked me the other day, and I'll say this, they said, but what good is it for these people to deny abortion right? Like what good, like what does it, help them? And I just kept saying, it's about power. It's about power. It made their very big donors very happy. And then their very big donors can, help them. Then they in turn help rewrite voting district laws so that they keep getting elected, so that their very big donors keep being happy. This is the cycle that occurs. And I have to hold that, and hold just the truth that there are humans who believe as deeply and passionately about the definition of life as I do, just completely differently. The level of belief is the same. And so how do I hold that? How do I do it? And for me, the answer is that empathetic practice. It's okay, I can understand where you're coming from. I don't agree with it. I don't find it easy to be in a relationship if you hold that view, but and that's my decision. There are people that I can do that with and people I can't. The same with the vaccine. There are people I'm still in a relationship with and people I'm not, who are on all sides of that spectrum, because it's a much more complicated issue for me than one issue. But all of that is to make the logical decisions outside of my emotion, and to trust that my emotions only belong to people I can fully trust in a very real way. And because some of this is my belief that one of the problems with the world right now, let me let grandma stumble out to her porch and yell at the kids on her lawn, is that our phones are fear machines. And the algorithms are designed to keep us afraid of everything. And that's an emotion. And the only antidote to fear is information. And that's information and logic and facts and all of those things are how we fight these things. So to answer how to have empathy for harmful people, you try to understand them. But, and here's the second thing, we still hold them accountable. Yeah. So like for Greg Abbott, like we're not in his constituency, but I've got friends that are. And so I ask how I can support them. We are big believers in vaccines here at Abbey Research. Everybody, within the sound of our voice constantly knows that we believe in vaccines. We do everything we can to support vaccine distribution. In fact, here on this channel, a couple of weeks ago, we got to talk to some incredible students in the state of Texas who are doing vaccine distribution on their campus and talking people through their fears and talking people through their emotions. And they actually had a party last night and we would have loved to be there and celebrate them so that they could know how proud of them we are. So we still hold people accountable and we still make decisions based on their decisions. We just don't make them out of emotion.
Yeah. And I think, as you said, it's extremely hard. And I know a lot of people, I saw a lot of people discussing, because first with Texas, we had the changing in reproductive rights law that was passed. And then they announced the following week, the state of Texas, that you could not enforce vaccine mandates because that was a violation of freedom. And I saw a lot of people like, how can you respect the bodily autonomy when it comes to vaccines and not? And like, how do you square that circle? Lots of frustration, lots of anger, lots of emotions. And the response to a lot of things when you disagree that strongly can be cynical that, there must be. And I think you made such a great point that like, sometimes it is about following the money and keeping people in power. But I looked at it and I was like, I struggled with it. And I was like, oh, how can you say that? Like, how can you say that? And then I was like, there are people that believe that. There are people that fundamentally believe that they have the right to say what happens to their own body unless that person is growing another human. And I fundamentally disagree. But that's, and what you said, I think it's worth repeating. One of the struggles of the empathetic practice is that you have to understand that these people believe with the same level of certainty or conviction that you believe what you believe. And so what you can do is understand it so that you can hold space for their humanity, but also understand it so that you can do what you need to do to work. Mm-hmm. And I think that bears repeating as well, that you can, do a lot of things that are positively contributing to what you believe in and the change you want to see happen in the world as a way to channel those frustrating emotions once you're done like spewing them at your partner or your best friend or your cat or whatever.
Yeah, because the thing is, we say it all the time, nobody changes their mind through shame or statistics or being screamed at or anything else. We change our mind through stories and relationships. Mm-hmm. And so I was definitely raised in an environment in which reproductive autonomy was a sin. That was something that I was raised, and not from my parents but definitely from my church and from the evangelical world that I grew up in. And I have changed my mind about that through stories and relationships. And that's, so I think for me, the other thing is that separating my emotions from this allows me to still remain in relationship with a lot of people that I fundamentally disagree with, not in the hopes that they would change their mind, but as a presence in their lives to remind them that their worldview isn't the only valid one. And to remember that there are other ways to see the world, and that we can have wider brains than we have, and that's okay. And that's my choice. That's my discipline. That's how I enact these things. I know many people that when they encounter difference, they have to shut down. We are concerned with that aspect. We are concerned with that decision. that when we encounter difference, we shut down because we think all that does is perpetuate where we already are. And so if you have to emotionally take care of yourself, completely valid. And we've been, by the way, talking about this for a year now, the two of us. How do we do this? And we finally arrived at this empathy as an intellectual posture situation because we never want to invalidate the incredibly valid emotions. But emotions are often also not productive if we're talking about how to move forward as humans, as a general humanity. How do we live more cohesively? How do we do those things? And that's our bag. That's not your bag. If you don't care, mazel. This is our best solution for how we move forward as broken, radical, beautiful, bruised, hopeful humans, is to separate understanding and empathy, is to separate empathy and emotions. But just, brief soapbox. The only reason we marry empathy and emotions is that emotions researchers are the ones talking about empathy. And they're actually pretty clear about the limits around that. But as is typical of academics, not good with the messaging. So we're just going to like piggyback on their research and say, actually, okay, so let's take this even further. There's people that can feel energies. There's people that can feel emotions. That's not the same as having an empathetic posture. And empathy is not a one-word solution for everything. And so how do we move through this? And over the last 18 months, we have been completely convinced that empathy has to be intellectual for it to be productive.
Yeah. And I think, too, one of the things that we've talked about as we came to this realization was that when you frame empathy as an emotional response, then it is something that people have or they don't have. Oh, I'm not really empathetic. Or they're good at or they're not good at. Oh, I don't really get angry. So like, I don't have angry outbursts. Oh, I'm not really good with empathy. And it becomes a way to dismiss the process of trying to understand others. And I think that's another thing that really stuck with both of us, where like people keep hitting this emotional stumbling block because especially with harmful people, that's a huge stumbling block. Sometimes your emotional reaction to that harm, whether it be on a statewide or a national scale, like what was happening in Texas, or with vaccine distribution, or on a personal scale with somebody who's personally harmful to you. It's really, really challenging. But I think like working towards that separation is what's important. And the other thing I wanted to say really briefly was that like, this is really flipping hard work, y'all.
Oh yeah. It's so hard. We're not being casual about this
at all. And so I want like recorded audio and video, the two of us saying, we call it a practice for a reason, because every day we struggle with it. Every day. Every day I open up my phone or I get on a Zoom call with Dr. Kristen, and we struggle with this. But we get up the next day and we try again. And there's days we're crap at it as well, which is always important to say out loud. Like there's days where I'm just not good at empathy. The practice didn't go well for me, and I'm just need to be in my emotions. And there's a part of that is making sure that you process your emotions as well. And whatever that process looks like for you and however long that takes, don't stunt that process because you feel like you need to get to empathy by a certain time or in a certain way, like depending on what it is. And we all process our emotions differently. Depending on what it is, that can look differently for a lot of situations as well. So there's not a cookie cutter, you spend 5 hours in your emotions and then you move to being able to empathize with other people. So give yourself a lot of grace around that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. A big summary point for me personally is that I believe deeply in informed choice. And so once you can understand someone else's worldview, you can make an informed decision if you want to be in a relationship with them or not.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So,
we're researchers.
Yeah. We're researchers. It's what we do. We ask questions. So but it's there's so many people that I love and am in deep relationship with, despite this like one thing that drives me bananas. But I know that thing, like I can manage my expectations. And like to use my husband as an example, because he's safe and he knows that this drives me bananas. He has this very Northern Irish tick where he will make a statement and make it sound like a question. So he'll say, you know, I don't really have any potatoes, you know? No, John, I don't know that. I don't know that. I'm not in your brain. I have no idea. I can't. No, I don't.
Do you want potatoes? Do you need to buy them? Do you need me to acquire potatoes for you? What's happening?
Help me to help you. Help me to help. He knows it drives me nuts. He knows it drives me nuts. And 9 days out of 10, I just kind of reframe it. Like, is that a question? Like, what reaction do you want from me right now? But every once in a while I get really bitchy and I say, no, John, I don't know that. And he's like, I can see him like emotionally backing off. But I knew those things about him and I could make an informed choice as to the relationship. I also know why he does it. I know where it comes from. His father talks the exact same way. And if I grew up in Northern Ireland, I probably would talk the same way. It's a super Northern Irish thing, especially the part of the country that he's from. Mm. So that's a cheeky example. But like that for me is really important, is that I can make informed decisions about what pieces of myself that person gets.
Yeah.
Because everybody gets different. There's only about 4 people on the planet that get all of me. Everybody else gets pieces. And so what pieces do I give these people or show these people, or how vulnerable am I based on the things I know about them and the informed choice that I can make through an empathetic practice?
Yeah. I don't have anything else for that, man. Yes. Yes. Yes to that. I think my summary thought was more about giving yourself grace. So it's really, really important to do the work. I mean, obviously we're researchers and in our cores. And, you know, on our wonderful slide video that we showed at the beginning of this, like the words that kind of center our entire process as educators are empathy and inclusivity and curiosity.
Yeah.
And so, you know, be curious about things, learn about things before you decide whether or not to have that thing in your life or that person in your life or form that relationship. If you watched any of our Colonizers World Tour, we are learning so much, asking so many questions. And it's both of us, we are just thriving in this environment in which we are forced to confront things that we thought we knew. And it's changing our perspective on, oh Lord, so many things. So it's a intellectual.
Like, did you guys know that Panama doesn't have a southern border? They don't have a southern border. They have a marshland. Join us and learn more about Panama's lack of a southern border. It's boggling my mind.
Oh, it's a fascinating place, as is all the places we've visited on this tour. But, you know, it is an intellectual practice, being curious and asking these questions. And, you know, worth repeating again for, I don't know, the 5th time, this, you know, the phrase that I got from my beloved friend and mentor, Tony Novosel from Northern Ireland. He's not from Northern Ireland, but about Northern Ireland, is understanding is not condoning. And it is a lesson we teach his students every semester. It is a lesson I learn and unlearn every day. But understanding somebody else's point of view does not mean you condone their actions or their beliefs or their thoughts. And you can do both of those things.
You can indeed. And I actually unpack that a little bit more in my TED Talk, which is imminent.
It's coming, y'all.
If you are listening to this on the replay crew, or live here, or in the podcast, sometime within the month of September, we anticipate making the TEDx Live, in which I talk about eliminating tolerance and installing welcome. And a lot of it is around this idea of understanding is not approving. It's not condoning. It's not agreeing with. It's not aligning with. It is understanding. And understanding is, of course, the basis of empathy.
Oh,
so friends and neighbors, it has been a delight to be with you as always. Replay crew, please make sure to say hello. Dragon and Jay and Siobhan, it's been so good to have you in the chat with us. Anyone else who has joined us, we hope that we've sparked some curiosity about yourself and others around you. And we're always happy to hear what things are challenges for you too. Drop us a comment. If you want it to be private, you can find us in direct message on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or an email at info@abbeyresearch.com. Abbey is with an E, and there's a hyphen between the two words, and we would love to chat with you. So in the meantime, we'll see you next week for another scintillating topic that I'm sure has nothing to do with joy whatsoever, and entirely to do with the muck of this human experiment. But also, we're open to topics.
Lord.
Let us know what you want to talk about. But no matter what, we'll see you then, and we will be on the same side of the state.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.